The entire point of this absurd episode is so that Jen can get some new clothes. And I wish I was kidding, but unfortunately that's the truth. Absolutely nothing of any significance occurs in this episode. It's 25 minutes of cringe, stupid nonsense that serves the sole purpose of providing a motivation for Jen to go out and buy some new clothes. Oh boy. She-Hulk is bad. Episode 5. We open as Jen's idiot brother arrives at her house. He wants her to sign a bunch of stuff that he plans on reselling. This is all merchandise that has been branded with the name She-Hulk. Jen explains to him that she doesn't own it and that someone else has been creating all these products. He tells her that she made a mistake and that she should have been the one to trademark the name herself. Jen and her secretary go to one of these fashion stores owned by Titania, the person trying to sell all of the She-Hulk merchandise. She confronts her about using the name, and Titania begins behaving like a spiteful bitch and is clearly not going to give up the name for the products. Side note, I think it's kind of funny and also pathetic that the actress who plays Titania is actually a stupid, spiteful bitch in real life as well. Just recently, she went on a rant on social media attacking Marvel fans and anyone who dares to criticize this fucking awful show.
I wonder if you're the worst person I've ever met.
But then again, she's also a racist idiot playing a blackwashed character, so her garbage personality and behavior shouldn't be much of a surprise to anyone. Back in the office, Jen repeatedly claims that she doesn't care about losing the name She-Hulk, but it's obvious that she does. Then we get several minutes of painfully stupid dialogue when the secretary and the other office guy talk about shoes.
You hear that, Rosen? We're having fun.
Oh. Hey, I'm not having fun.
Eventually, these two idiots come to the realization that what Jen really needs is a better superhero outfit, and the office guy happens to know someone, so they head out to go and speak with him. They go to this cafe that's supposed to be a front for the business. Eventually, they're able to convince the guy behind the counter that they're looking to buy some superhero stuff, and he brings them into the back room where he reveals that he sells bootleg merchandise.
I'm glad to see you got a sense of humor.
They explain that this is not the sort of stuff that they're looking for. They're instead looking for a tailor who can make a new superhero suit. The guy running the cafe agrees to introduce them if they buy a whole bunch of his bootleg merchandise garbage. They agree to this, which leads them to wearing all of this garbage in the next scene. I'm sure this is meant to be funny, but it's just stupid and cringe. Also, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Disney actually does end up selling some of this fake bootleg merchandise. After all, the response from Disney consumers on social media was overwhelmingly positive because they're more than happy to eat up any of the garbage that Disney wants to shovel their way.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
So these two idiots arrive at a big golden door. I don't know if this is the same building or if they just teleported here. Who knows? Regardless, there's an annoying voice coming through the speaker and asks them if they have an appointment. This is an extremely stupid and overused trope. The guy who makes the suits obviously knows if he has any appointments for that day. There is simply no way that he has enough clients for this incredibly niche business that he wouldn't be able to keep track of them all. Immediately, he tries to turn these two morons away, but the secretary claims that her client is an Avenger.
Basically, kind of a big deal.
Which right now is obviously a lie, as She-Hulk is not a part of the Avengers, but it's something that will become true in the next few years, because if you weren't aware, Disney plans to replace all of the current Avengers with female versions of basically the same thing, because fucking of course.
Class is over, John. Time for something new and improved.
In fact, this has been the primary purpose of almost all of Phase 4. They want to replace those old characters with new, better, more diverse female versions of the pretty much exact same character.
This is terrible.
However, the guy who's making these suits is an idiot, and he believes these two clowns that their client actually is an Avenger, and they set up an appointment. Back in the office, Jen is speaking with her boss, who is upset about the billboards using the She-Hulk name, and Jen tries to explain that the name doesn't belong to her and that someone else is using it to create all of the merchandise and those advertisements. Several times it's been pointed out in this episode that Jen waited too long in order to trademark the name She-Hulk, and that it's a first-come, first-served type situation when someone makes a legal claim to it. Now, do you remember when the writers on this show explained that they couldn't turn this series into a legal procedural because they didn't know anything whatsoever about how the law actually works? Well, so far this episode has been a pretty good example of that. Even if the writers were too stupid to understand all this, it's kind of frustrating that all of the lawyer characters also don't understand. Without going too much into it, there's a very long process in creating a trademark for a name. Once the paperwork is filed, other people are given the opportunity to dispute it. This usually happens if the name of one product is too close to the name of a similar product. Furthermore, a name doesn't necessarily need to be trademarked right away. If a person or a company has a public and established image of a particular name, then that name is given certain inherent protections even if no formal trademark has ever been processed. In this situation, there is absolutely no way that Titania could have possibly trademarked the name of one of the most famous people on the planet without it being disputed. This whole situation is utter nonsense right from the get-go.
Dare you get me?
Regardless, her boss is now upset because the law firm is being sued by Titania over the use of the name She-Hulk. Jen plans to fix it herself, but her boss insists that one of the other lawyers in the firm, who probably knows a lot more about trademarks, be the one to handle the case. This is going to be handled by a character known as Mallory Book, who we saw very briefly in one of the earlier episodes, and as I have already pointed out, this is a racistly blackwashed character because fucking of course. I already marked this on the sheet, so I can't do it again. Mallory asks Jen why she never sought a trademark on the name She-Hulk, and Jen claimed that she didn't think it was necessary. And then Mallory replies by coming up with their brilliant strategy and says that they need to countersue. She says that they need to show that Jen had already established use of the name She-Hulk in a professional capacity and therefore has ownership.
Hey, I've seen this one.
Wow, that sounds exactly like what I just said 2 minutes ago. The difference here is that the show is attempting to portray Mallory as being some sort of legal genius, and she's able to come up with this brilliant strategy and this tactic that is just so amazing and no one would ever have thought of it, and it's just the smartest thing ever, except it's not, because this would essentially be step one in the entire trademark process.
Danny kind of forgot it.
It's fairly obvious what the writers are trying to do. They want to make this female blackwashed character appear as if she's some sort of super genius legal person, and it's just not the case. The next day, they get to show up in the courtroom, which is the most fastest and unrealistic representation of the court system I've ever seen, and the two sides argue their cases. Titania explains that she uses the name to create a very popular line of products, and that's why Jen wants to use it now. Meanwhile, Mallory argues that Jen has been using the name for quite a while. After listening to all this, the judge demands that Jen show even more proof that she has been extensively using the name, or else she is going to grant ownership of the name to Titania. This is fucking idiotic.
All right, explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old, okay?
Even someone with the most basic of legal knowledge, that clearly the writers don't have, would be able to see that Jen is the proper owner because all of her usage of the name She-Hulk predates that of Titania by several months. But since the episode is only half over, this stupidity needs to be dragged out for another 20 minutes. But don't worry, it gets worse. Now we're going to be introduced to the guy who makes the superhero suits, and of course he's going to be
Gay!
And not just by a little bit either, he needs to be flamboyantly, because stereotypes are totally fine and okay and cool to use as long as the writers are woke weirdos who check off enough diversity boxes.
Is it that you want to ruin that, or are you just homophobic?
But even if we ignore all that, having the character behave in this way is such an unoriginal and lazy trope. But I suppose this is what's to be expected when you hire writers with no talent. However, upon seeing Jen in her Shrek form, the guy doesn't actually want to take the job, and again he says that he has a very big client list and is much too busy, which is a bunch of bullshit because the number of superpowered characters in the MCU is very small, and there's just no way that he actually has that much business. But regardless, Jen's secretary, who, by the way, happens to be wearing some absolutely hideous makeup.
Oh my God! What's wrong with your face?
What the fuck were you thinking? But the secretary convinces him that Shrek is actually going to be an Avenger and they're waiting for the paperwork or something dumb like that, and that her cousin is the Hulk and blah, blah, blah. And once again, this is a lie by the character, but again, remember, this actually is Disney's plan to replace the Hulk with She-Hulk.
You don't have a better bad idea than this? This is the best bad idea we have, sir.
So the tailor agrees to make a suit for Jen. They go back to the office where one of the weirdo guys that Jen went on a date with happens to be there, and apparently he's a very wealthy client of the law firm. Of course, he immediately recognizes Shrek and insists that they should get back together again. And it took me about a fraction of a second to realize that this is what they're going to do to resolve the problem of Jen not having proof that she's been using the name She-Hulk. And it's going to come in the form of her stupid dating profile. And this is exactly the thing that gets discussed in the following scene. Jen comes to the realization that she went on a bunch of dates as the She-Hulk, and that is how those men know her. In fact, some of them don't even know that Jen exists. They only know of She-Hulk. So the guy that she ended up sleeping with, who didn't even know that Jen existed, is probably going to end up being the star witness. Spoiler, he does. Predictably, this is exactly what happens in the following scene. In the courtroom, all of those guys give awkward and cringe testimony about their dates with She-Hulk. The star witness, again, of course, is the last guy, and he explains that he would never go on a date with Jen because she's not his type, but however, he is very much interested in She-Hulk, as it appears that it's almost like a different person.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half.
Of course, I can't blame the guy because despite the bad CGI in this series, She-Hulk at least has the appearance of an attractive woman, while the actress playing Jen looks like 10 pounds of shit packed into a 5-pound bag.
You're so gross!
You have to like it or you're sexist.
With all of this new evidence, the judge decides to side with Jen and grants her all rights to the name of She-Hulk and orders Titania to cease all use of it. But don't worry, it gets worse. Jen and Mallory go to the bar that night where we get a whole bunch of man-hating feminist garbage. They talk about how easy it is for men and that women have to work so much harder, which is a complete fucking lie. Because once more, I would like to point out that the writers on this very series, a group of pathetically untalented women, were given the job simply because they're women. They didn't have to actually work for it or prove that they had any kind of skill whatsoever. They were just given the job of writers and directors and all the other show creators and important people on this particular series. They were simply given those jobs because they were women.
You're saying it's a woman's game because women are weak and need more help.
Yes.
You absolute fucking clowns. The lack of self-awareness by the writers and the show creators on this series is truly astounding. The following day, Jen heads back to the flamboyant tailor in order to pick up her clothes, and we get a teaser for another character, and this time it's Daredevil. However, it's not the red suit, it's going to be the yellow suit, which has some kind of significance in the comics, but it doesn't really matter because Daredevil doesn't show up in this episode. Or the next one. Or the next one. Or the next one. And when he does finally show up, trust me, you're gonna wish that he didn't.
Everything woke turns to shit.
And that's one of the main problems of this show. The only thing that it actually brings of any interest is cameos. But what's worse than that is they don't even properly deliver on it. There were commercials and teasers showing that Matt Murdock was going to show up in the She-Hulk series, and here we have a teaser showing it, and then another trailer showing that, and yet the character is nowhere to be seen. It's a bait and switch that Disney needed to do in order to try to trick people into watching more episodes of this awful series. But thankfully, that's the end of episode 5.
I'm taking shots at the enemy. I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new rock, electronic, blow the sonic roof up. I'm too honest when I take a few shots. They're too toxic, need to take the new song.